Welcome to Whitespace. You've been here for as long as you can remember. You go left, you go right, you go up and down, but it all loops back around. There is no escape. In your room, there are a couple of items that have always been there. There's a laptop, a box of tissues, and your cat, who, much like you, is waiting for something to happen. The only way to escape this area is very grim. You have to open the in-game menu and stab yourself. That's how the game starts. Omori is an RPG video game with horror elements developed by an indie game studio that started with one person, Omocat. And from everything that I've read online, I absolutely adore their story of making art and merch inspired by the style of video games and anime combined. From day one, this game already meant a lot to Omocat and fans alike, as it was mainly funded from a Kickstarter and merch made by Omocat in 2014. Omori would later be officially released on December 25th, 2020, exactly 1 year ago today if you're watching this by the time it goes up, and I haven't messed up the deadline. But that's pretty much all the history and backlog you need to know before we jump into the game. So my first impressions of Omori were really positive. I liked the art style, music, and everything else seemed to fit really well together. And even though I'm not a huge fan of turn-based combat, which is the gameplay style for Omori, I kinda grew to love it. I've obviously played games like Final Fantasy and Pokemon before, but I've just never really enjoyed the style of turn-based combat, because why would we take turns slapping each other when I could just end the enemy in one shot? But after almost 30 hours of gameplay, I found it to be good for the pacing of the story itself. Otherwise, the game would end way faster and there wouldn't be as much tension in the narrative. And there's just something about RPG games like Omori that just works so well with turn-based combat. I actually started playing the game earlier last year, but I've never been able to finish it up until last month, mainly because I had finally gathered up enough courage to play it all the way through. The day I finished Omori, I was shocked, lost for words, staggered, all of those things and more. I just felt like lying down and staring at the ceiling for a bit. Then I went f***ing insane for hours on end, reading the wiki and trying to gather all information about the remaining endings that I didn't get, and if there were any secrets that I may have missed. And a piece of advice for when you play the game, I highly implore you to take your time with it and look around. Even if it's not a secret, it's always a funny or at least somewhat interesting conversation with an NPC. Every new area had a lot of side missions, different unique characters, and its own style and music that either lifted the mood up or destroyed it completely. Don't let the colorful atmosphere, cute pixels, and electronic music fool you. This is just the first layer of fantasy. Below it lies dark secrets and grim feelings of depression and anxiety. Your fears leave the real world and follow you into this one, creeping around every corner, watching you as you play with your friends and plan a big adventure. But beyond all that, the game is still incredibly fun to play, and unexpectedly wholesome and goofy throughout most character interactions. Everything about Omori makes sense and properly fits together in the world. Nothing ever felt rushed about it. And that's all due to Omocat taking their sweet time with it. And it was all worth it. I've never experienced an RPG game that has shocked me emotionally and left me in such a staggered state before. Maybe Undertale, but for me, this was way more shocking. The storytelling and world building in Omori is masterfully done. And I mean every bit of the world. From a collectible letter P in the bathroom to multiple endings, all of which were thought about thoroughly and stitched together wonderfully. It's safe to say that I have a preferred ending, which is the one that I got in my first playthrough, but even though it is subjectively the best ending, I think that no matter which one I had gotten first, I would have still liked it the most. Because to me, Omori wasn't about getting the good or bad ending. It was unironically about the friends we made along the way. But no, really, the experience of being along Omori and his friends through the mundane and the abnormal alike, fighting sharks, using Pluto as a means of fast travel, overcoming our fears and admitting our grave mistakes that hurt others and also hurt ourselves in return. You are Omori, the main character. He seems shy and timid, usually not even saying a word to his friends, and the only one in a black and white color palette. All of his friends and everyone else exists in a colorful mix of purple, green, blue, yellow, red, and everything else in between. And even in early concept art of the game, Omori was the only one in a blue shade in comparison to the warm pink of other characters. Omori stands out, and he's made that way for a purpose. On the other hand, meet the gang. Aubrey, Kel, Hiro, Basil, and Mari, Omori's sister. They are your best friends and will always have your back throughout this crazy adventure across the universe. Playing with sandcastles, enjoying picnics, and fighting turnips, there's nothing that Omori and his friends can't do when they're together. I love Omori. It's just like life all in all, with the positive and the negative, and the craziest thing is that after playing the game, I don't see Omori's friends as NPCs. I see them as my friends. Kel, the goofy friend that will never allow me to be sad. Hiro, the older friend that takes care of all of us. Aubrey, the hot-headed yet lovely friend that I wish I could have been there more for when she needed me. And Basil, my best friend that loves me without expecting anything in return and will always have my back, even if I'm in the wrong. Omori taught me some very important philosophies about life. Not just how lovely it is to have friends that care about you, but to also care and love yourself. Because if you don't, then it's harder for others to love you too. And I don't mean loving yourself in an obnoxious, egotistical way, but in a way that no matter what happens and regardless of what's going to happen, you should appreciate yourself for making it this far. Pain doesn't last forever, and as simple as that statement might sound, I wish I could say it to my younger self and to everyone else who needs to hear it. It's true that pain doesn't go away, it's always going to stay with you. But the difference is that your world starts to broaden more, and so you encounter more. Not to say that you will forget about pain or leave it behind, but that you won't be constantly devastated in this loop of grief and sorrow. Somehow, in some way, that loop can be broken, and most of the time only you know how to break it. Another phrase that you're going to see a lot while playing is Omori did not succumb. It serves a couple of reasons, the simplest of which is to give the player a second chance in a fight before total game over, and having to play that part again from the start. But on a much more intimate level, this simple phrase represents the lack of submission and surrenderance to your inner demons, or just anything that life throws at your way, really. It was also a lot of fun seeing everything from Omori's perspective, and because he doesn't talk much, it allows for the player to further insert themselves into the story. You are Omori. His memories of joy and pain are your memories of joy and pain. Everything that he goes through, we go through the same way, and I loved every bit of it. Omori himself is the literal embodiment of all the resistance someone could have towards themselves. Throughout the game, we get pieces of a puzzle, explaining what happened to Omori and what shaped him to act this way. His friends still love him, but he doesn't love himself. And we start to sense why as he begins to reminisce and remember what he's been through. But the question isn't whether or not he can remember, it's whether or not him and his friends can move on. As a spoiler-free review, the video ends here. I unfortunately cannot say that I recommend Omori for the faint of heart, as it deals with some intense and dark themes. But what I can say is that I loved playing Omori because I genuinely haven't had this much fun with an RPG in so long. And everything from the songs to the story written intertwined greatly together and made me feel such a way that I honestly couldn't have ever imagined feeling before starting this journey. Welcome to Black Space, the parallel. White space represented a clean slate, no memories, no trauma, nothing at all, and Black Space is the opposite of that. It contains all of Sunny's repressed fears and trauma. It's the first layer under the entire fantasy that Omori had built. Honestly, this level is my favorite in the entire game. It's the breaking point for the player. No more hints and peeping shadows at corners. This is where everything that's dark about Omori resides. Walking around, everything is destroyed and distorted. Unclear yet powerful. Or just random. In Black Space, Sunny encounters Mari in the form of something many times, and each and every time she says the same things. Sunny, I love you. I'm sorry. At this point, we know how Mari died. It was an accident and Sunny pushed her down the stairs. Her head hit the broken violin and she never woke up again. But why were they arguing in the first place? Mari was sweet. She loved and was beloved by the entire gang. and she was also Sunny's sister and mentor. They shared a strong bond that could never be broken. But like all of us, Mari wasn't perfect, but she obsessed over perfection. She liked everything being the way it's supposed to be without a lot of interferences, and with Sunny learning how to play the violin and the recital coming up, they had to prepare. Mari wanted to get everything right, so she pushed herself and also pushed Sunny to reach that perfection she had set on her mind. Unfortunately, that did not go as planned. Sunny was overwhelmed and stressed from the standards that his sister had placed on him. He felt restrained and weak, and in a moment of anger lashing out, he broke his violin, which was something that tied him with his friends. And when Mari tried to comfort him, the instant fear that came across Sunny quite literally changed his entire life moving forward. So, what do you get when you mix projecting your own mistakes onto other people, being so disconnected from the reality you're living in that you build your own fantasy to escape it, and stairs? You get trauma the size of Humphrey. It was extremely heartbreaking to experience the narrative from Omori/Sunny's point of view. Because of the built-up stress that Sunny had and because of the trauma of Mari's death, he stayed home all day, refusing to function as Sunny and instead stay in his own head as Omori, where he would still be able to hang out with his friends and go on all sorts of tremendous adventures, but it all came at a cost. The world that Omori built was on top of another one, which was full of darkness and resentment. And those feelings of guilt and regret were so powerful that they seeped through to Sunny's fantasy world and, in return, the real world. Something that also piqued my interest was how Sunny projected his own self-hate and self-resentment onto Basil in Omori's fantasy. Throughout most of the game, we're looking for Basil, and whenever we do find him, he seems very shaky and hesitant. And later on, we see him act in odd ways that would hint at the possibility of him wanting to commit suicide. Or at least that's where I think Basil was headed. The guilt and shame he had for staging Mari's death as a suicide was definitely callous and wrong to do. But at the same time, Basil wins Best Friend of the Decade for trying his best to shift the blame off of Sunny by saying all those things like, "You didn't push her, it was something behind you, didn't you see it?" And as destructive as this method of shifting blame was, because it did make Sunny delusional under layers upon layers of a coping mechanism, it was also horrible for Basil himself, because unlike Sunny, Basil remembered it all, and he felt immense guilt to the point that he could no longer play along to his own lie. He had to tell Sunny the truth so that they could both move on. When Sunny, Kel, Hiro, and Aubrey stayed over at Basil's house, it was in case there was an attempt of Basil killing himself. But because Sunny is curious about the secret Basil has hid, and also caring about his friend's safety, as he should. By the way, any of you watching that took the neutral ending, what's wrong with you? How heartless can you be? But then Basil tries to attack Sunny. It's a painful fight. I never ever thought that I would have to fight Basil, but this is what it's come to. Basil's intense guilt manifests as his own something. Basil isn't purposefully trying to kill us, but he's extremely run down by his shame that he has to make Sunny remember. However, Basil isn't the final boss of the game. How could he be? He's our friend. No, that doesn't make sense. The final boss of the game is us. It's Sunny. It's Omori. The pressure and agony built up from those 4 years is all coming down to this moment, Omori versus Sunny. Your own worst enemy is yourself. It always has been and always will be. I legitimately had goosebumps all across the entirety of this boss fight. The music starts off with a mellow violin, Sunny's instrument, and the more you progress the fight, the more distorted and broken it starts to sound. Through this final boss fight, Sunny needs to calm down and remain composed as Omori is much stronger in comparison. The temptation of remaining oblivious is much stronger. Sunny chips off at Omori's health, slash by slash, as Omori returns the attacks with mighty stabs. Every phase Omori doesn't succumb. He's much more determined. You are much more determined to bury the past and keep dreaming because it's easier that way. But you can't. You shouldn't. For Basil, for yourself, for Mari. Regardless, you lose the fight. And then you're faced with an option. Do you want to continue? This time, to continue means to keep fighting your demons. Do not succumb, do not hide. Come out of the shadows and live your life like Mari would have wanted. Or give up. Take the easier way out. Forget and let Omori win. You'll remain in your fantasy, daydreaming about fighting turnips and going on adventures like your real friends used to. The choice is yours, but no matter what, you should always remember that the other side of you will always remain. Maybe he won't take over anymore, but that doesn't mean that he will stop existing completely. I see a lot of people confuse Omori as a second identity of Sunny, but he really isn't. Omori is the manifestation of Sunny's coping mechanism. He's an alias that Sunny lived through in his fantasy in order to entertain the idea that his friends were still together, as well as that Mari was still alive. She wouldn't even go on adventures with you because Sunny feared for her to die again, so she only exists as a hub NPC of sorts, always sitting in a picnic, never at the risk of any real danger. And the opposite can be said towards Basil. Sunny projected his own self-hatred towards Basil by not including him in most of their adventures, and that led to Omori and his friends entirely forgetting about Basil, which I think means that Sunny himself was starting to forget Basil because either he had a direct relation to something, or just because he didn't want to listen to Basil's truth about Mari. After waking up in the hospital as Sunny, I knew what I had to do. The game ends as Sunny tells his friends the truth, and in the final cutscene we see Basil and Sunny smiling at each other, as Basil's feeling of guilt disintegrates and retracts, meaning that they have both moved on from their trauma and depression. The truth is, pain never really goes away, but the world around us starts to expand more. And over time, we eventually look back and reminisce on what was and less of what could have been. Omori has been an outstanding experience that reminded me of how important it is to persevere and keep fighting, as well as never succumbing to your demons or guilt. This video has been a year in the making, on and off in the background, and I'm so thankful to finally have it out. By the time you're watching this, it should be Christmas, so Merry Christmas, guys. I wish you all a great holiday, and I hope that you're doing good mentally as we jump into this next year full of possibilities. And even if you're not doing too good right now, know that it will be okay. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but you're going to get through this. You know you can, I know you can, the entire world knows you can. Show them what you can do. But yeah, I just wanted to say that to whoever and whomever needs to hear it, because I know I do. Thank you, I love you, stay red, and I will see you in the next one.